And we got the plant overview in its later construction stages. So you can see the power plant at the back there. It's got its stack chimney built already, and for some reason it's painted just in part. So I don't really know how they paint them, but it's very interesting that they have them painted like that so far. And then looking at the hydrogen reformer furnace, for some reason there's only two chimneys, and the third one hasn't been put in place yet. It only has its base. The coker drums and coker towers have been put together. Those are looking very good. Besides that, there's not much I can comment on because we can't really see that much anymore. So, and then we have this frame over here so that we can reference back to the modern picture we have, and that would be those three vessels over here. Thing that I don't recognize here is this building over here, or maybe that's maybe I'm just looking at it differently. Maybe it's not even the building. It could be could be the furnace, the coker furnace. It's just back in the day it just was so brand new and was just painted in a nice white color that we don't see that today, and it's very hard to make out. So you can start seeing how as they add pipes and cable trays on top of the piping rack, there's like less and less light that gets in, and it starts to get pretty dark in the plant. And especially like in the our current days, like walking in the plant 5 is like walking at night, because there's just so many pipes that have been added over the years, and so many cable trays have been added over the years. It just completely blocks the sunlight. And another thing to consider is that over the years they have abandoned a lot of piping on the piping racks, because sometimes when you make changes to piping, it's not always efficient to remove the old pipes, so quite often they do abandon old piping in place, and it just sits there, and whenever they add more piping they just put it on top of the rack. And yeah, over the years, you know, in some places it gets really congested and really dark, to the point where it's, you know, it almost feels like a nighttime. Where people walk, they usually do have lights in place just so people, you know, for safety and stuff like that. But there are some places where, you know, when you leave the piping rack area and you kind of go towards where the vessels are, and there's not always a light in there, so there's also like a whole bunch of tripping hazards, like hoses and cables and whatnot, just sitting on the plant floor. So definitely there are some interesting hazards to come across because of the darkness and stuff like that, because of the congestion. Here we see the North Tank farm as it slowly pans over to show us the power plant. So in this case we would be looking from this point of view, somewhere around here. That's our North Tank farm over here, and then the power plant is over there. It's actually kind of crazy to see all this, because back in the day this used to be the main road here along the hydrogen reformer furnace and the power plant, but nowadays there's just so many pipes and piping racks that have been built here that it's really it has become essentially a one-way road in certain places, where it's just the road is so narrow, like you're only allowed to go in one way, but then it just gets a bit bigger, and even when it gets a bit bigger, it's still kind of hard to pass somebody else on this road, especially if it's like a big truck that's carrying something. Yeah, you can really see that, like back in the day there was just, you know, a couple of pipes sitting on the ground, but nowadays we have like a whole bunch of piping racks that have been built next to it, and then some more pipes that have been added next to it. So this doesn't really look that much different from what we saw already earlier, so I'm not gonna say much about this. And we see how they're building the bucket wheel excavators. Pretty cool stuff, pretty big pieces of tech. I can't really comment much on this because I haven't worked with that, and you know this. I actually don't know what happened to those original bucket wheel excavators, because I think you don't see them around these days, and so I'm assuming they just scrapped them for metal or something, because they got rid of them a long time ago. I don't know at what point they decided to switch over to just having a whole bunch of smaller shovel type excavators, but at some point they did, and they got rid of the bucket wheel excavators and all the conveyor belt system that was also part of that. And we can see our hydrogen reformer furnace again in the distance. Judging by the frame that we saw in there, the bucket wheel excavator was probably built somewhere in this area, exactly where we have the plant 27. And we get to see our power plant. Something like there's a big hole in the wall. I don't know why it's there. Probably that's what they used back in the day to maybe get the equipment in. But we can't really see whole lot. Then we get to see our bucket wheel excavators in action. I think they were actually in the testing phase. But there's a lot of explanation you hear in this video, and I really recommend watching this video if you want to learn kind of like on your own without my my explanations, because at the end of the day I can't really tell you a lot about everything, only the things I worked with. And then we get to see this the original control room, which I can't even imagine where that would be, because I have visited control rooms a few times, and they sure don't look like that anymore. Nowadays the control rooms have, like, you know, massive flat screens, and you know, the operator just sits at the desk. He has a massive screen. He has a couple of like the touch screens as well, and he just kind of controls everything from there. Very nice and very easy to use. You don't have to run around looking for the switch, I guess. I don't know, I would probably say that you know, they try to keep their control systems as modern as possible. Maybe not the latest in technology, but modern day technology. Yeah, it's actually crazy, because you got all those control switches, and I shouldn't probably call them gauges, indicators for wherever, and looks like some kind of CRT screens there, and then you got your annunciator lights as well. Yeah, and maybe it's a good thing that nowadays you can easily recreate all of that in much more convenient way, where just you know, you don't have as much information on your screen. You can design your control screens and graphics such that it's easy to look at, easy to understand, and whenever something does happen, you know, you don't get flooded with alarms and stuff like that. You only get the stuff that you need. This is very easy to implement as well, because you don't need to manually go physically install like a light and wire it. You just do it on your computer. You draw a button, you draw a light, and that's pretty much how it is. And we get the power plant again. This is again looks like the edge of the plant 7, and then we got that same stack slash flare I was talking about earlier. So in this case we see how it flares away wherever. We'll talk about flares and stuff like that later on. It's a very interesting topic, and it's part of a safety system, essentially, to burn away you know, toxic gases and the hydrocarbons that haven't been fully processed. Sometimes you have like an upset happening in the plant, or maybe you're starting up the plant, or you're shutting down the plant. You would end up with a lot of unprocessed hydrocarbons, because, you know, a lot of pieces of equipment probably haven't been fully started yet and stuff like that. And the same goes for the shutdown too. And so this part here, it's not much technical. I'm just gonna say that, yeah, this is the time when we had the big boys coming to town to celebrate the opening of the plant, which is actually gonna be here in a couple of days, 2 days. It's the 28th of September right now, and September 30th is when they opened the plant back then. Yeah, so we see this interesting inflatable kind of building. So originally, from what I learned in this video, originally they used it for any work that required moderate temperature. So like first they used that for concrete pouring, and then they were using that to in the early stages of assembly of the bucket wheel excavators. And at the end of the construction, they decided, you know what, we're gonna reuse it to host the celebration of the grand opening of the plant. That's what it looked like. I like what they wrote in here. Man develops his world. And isn't that true? So here they did a little bit of a speech. They talked about stuff. What's interesting is actually after this celebration, they did a plant tour for all the big guys. I think it would be quite interesting to actually be there and see all of that stuff when it was built and when it was started up and operating. Very few of us got to be there, and very few of us who actually got to be there are alive still. Yeah, but we still get to see some of the old footage from the early days of the plant, because they do show it, and they do explain some of the things as well. So besides the bucket wheels, they also did have those shovel type excavators as well that we see here. And I think this was just mostly used to remove overburden, but maybe I'm wrong. I'm not too familiar with mining operations. So if you think about that dump truck, that whole truck is pretty big, and the shovel excavator is like 3 times that size. So I've never seen a shovel excavator up close, and I never really seen the dump truck up close, but those are huge pieces of equipment. Those that probably be that shovel excavator would probably be the size of a like apartment building. And then we see the bucket wheel excavators again. What's interesting is I looked into this frame for a little bit, and I realized just how close the actual bucket wheel excavators once used to be to the actual main admin. So that building we see at the back, you see how it has like a L shape and then it continues on at the back there. So that's actually the main administration building we have at the plant right now. I don't know if it was the main administration building back in the day. I know it serves also as a warehouse, because all the offices would be kind of like along, like over here and then over here. The actual warehouses would be here for warehousing stuff. Like whenever I drove by there, I've seen, just, a bunch of valves and stuff like that just sitting on the shelves and whatnot. And if we refer to that footage, it seems like our bucket wheel excavators used to be exactly where, well, not exactly, but in the vicinity of where the plant 27 is today, which is kind of crazy. How it's crazy to see how close it used to be back in the day. Imagine like walking out of the office back in the day and then seeing this massive bucket wheel excavator right outside. So yeah, that's pretty crazy. Maybe only the people that actually worked at the mining operations or near the mining operations would know that, but you get a lot of dust in those areas. So you would never open your office window, because you know that if you open your office window by tomorrow, it's all your entire office, your entire desk, your entire floor would be covered in dirt. So yeah, that's the main admin building. Then we don't see much of what's going on in here, but then we do see the North Tank Farms, so which confirms my understanding of where this is located. Like I mentioned earlier, originally they did have a conveyor belt that would be connected to the plant 3 on one side, and then it would be connected to one of the bucket wheels, and then the bucket wheels would supply the oily sands to the plant 3. And here are those conveyor belts. And this looks like a conveyor belt actually inside of the plant 3, just judging by how it looks. I can't guarantee because I've never been inside the plant 3. So got some pieces of equipment that are turning around. This looks like a hopper. Oh boy, look at how close those guys are to the to this hopper thingy. and then there's like the oil sands coming by. You wouldn't want to fall there because that's gonna kill you. Then we got, I think those are called conditioning drums. Basically, this is where they're mixing the oil sands with the caustic soda and the hot water to begin the process of extraction of bitumen from the oil sands. Plant 3, so this is your, I forget what they refer to in this video. This is like more or less a separation cell, so you would have all your bitumen froth getting to the top, accumulating at the top, and then you have this little thing, that little blade that goes around and kind of pushes it over to the sides. And at the bottom you would have your sand and clay and then water, and it's all like mixed together, and that's kind of how they did the separation back in the day. I think it's very similar to what I saw in plant 300 and plant 86 in my days. The technology always kind of changes a little bit. It's hard to say because I don't fully understand what's happening in here to be able to compare with what's happening in our plants today, our modern plants. And to provide some more explanation on the plant 3, actually plant 3 nowadays is abandoned in place according to the engineering documents. So the original plant 3 that was built, all the equipment there just kind of right now sits in there. So the plant has been abandoned. Apparently they use the plant once in a while to generate sand for to use in tailings for whatever reason. But that's all I know for now, and which is also explains why I've never been to that plant, is because there's never any projects at the abandoned plant. So this is what actually plant 3 looks like. So you've got this really tall part into which you have the conveyor belt going in. So this actually looks very similar to the power plant because we also have a conveyor belt going in there. The only difference I think is that the conveyor belt at the power plant has cover that's kind of bigger. Here it seems like we also kind of have a cover, but it's much more thinner. The conveyor belt itself looks a lot more thinner than at the power plant. So yeah, this is kind of how it looked like back in the day. They got rid of the conveyor belt a long time ago. I think maybe early 2000s or maybe after. Really hard to say because we don't really have a whole lot of pictures. Even the Google Maps don't really tell us about what this place used to look like back in the day and when it got changed. It was done a long time ago. So in my days, like I said, the plant 3 was abandoned and there is no conveyor belt, but when you drive you can still see the foundation of the conveyor belt, the concrete foundation, and how it's all kind of, it actually got destroyed over the years. So the actual concrete base is kind of broken into pieces. What's interesting is I actually used to drive by here like every day back in the day, and I always looked at this plant and I'm like, man, there is like it's such a big building. I wonder if I would ever get to go in there, and I know it's abandoned, so most likely no. But the other building that I've been to is the plant 4, which has the centrifuges in there. The centrifuges for the final extraction, and we'll talk about the final extraction here in a second. But yeah, and then we got the electrical building, which was built for some reason very far away from the plant. Maybe there are some reasons for that, but from information that I have, from what I remember, this is the MCC building, the electrical building, and then we got the cable trays going in there. A very interesting frame here. It's actually really hard to make out where this picture was taken from, just because this whole area has changed so much. Like we can definitely recognize our power plant over here. We just talked about plant 3 and we just talked about plant 3 electrical building over here. So it should be somewhere like in this area, but this whole area has changed so much over the years because that's where they had the bucket wheels, that it's really hard to make out where this was taken originally from. We see some pipes in here. I can tell you that those pipes are no longer in place. And what we do see here, it just doesn't look like those same pipes. Because I used to drive by here every day, and I know that the pipes that we have up here, they're like very big in diameter compared to what we have on those on those frames over here. And then we have some other pipe in here that also nothing notable. But yeah, really hard to make out where that was taken from. Just over the years, I guess so many things have changed, and as they pan over the camera, probably, yeah, like we see how this whole area is like, it's completely different. Like nowadays we have like trees in here, and a whole bunch of stuff has changed, and just doesn't look like that area at all anymore. And I do have some photos here from the like aerial photography, I guess. I don't know who took that. I'm gonna do my sources later, and I think I'm gonna change the way I reference things, just because it's like I always end up with this massive thing of text that kind of covers the entire screen, and it's really hard to see stuff. So I'll see what I can do there to make it a bit better. But yeah, here we have our plant 3. Actually, let's first of all go based on things that we know for sure. So power plant over here, the hydrogen reformer furnace, the main administration building, and then the plant 3. As you can see, this is a somewhat of a modern photo. I think this was taken actually before I even started working at the plant, so maybe 2018, maybe 2016, hard to say. But we don't have the conveyor belt in here anymore. We see that over the years they decided to paint the top part of the plant 3 to have like a nice little blue and yellow line, typical Suncor color theme, and then we have our of course, over the years, originally when we looked at this area, there was just the plant 3 and plant 4, and then the electrical building, which is the one over here. But over the years we had other plants that were built here, the plant 16, plant 87, and a couple of other buildings that are part of the plant 3, I think, the heat exchanger building, and the bitumen storage tank, which I think wasn't there originally. Let me check. Yeah, originally we did not have this bitumen diluted bitumen storage tank. Ever since it got built, it became the staple of the base plan. You know, as you drive in, there's this massive tank that says Suncor Energy on it, which is very cool, a local landmark. Yeah, so here, like I was saying, here we got the plant 3, and then we got the plant 4 over here, and then you know you see how busy this area has become over the years.